Tēnā koutou katoa, ko o te tumu whakarai o te irirangi o te motu. Ko Cam Harland aho, nō reira, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou katoa. Thank you for joining us for this 2020 launch of Where Are the Audiences? For those of you who don't know me, I'm Cam Harland, CEO of New Zealand On Air. In a moment, Jeremy Todd from Glasshouse will take us through the findings of this year's research. First, let me say just how hugely valuable to NZ On Air this research is, and we know that it's also so much so for you as our stakeholders as well. For the past 6 years, we've relied on this research to help us understand the very fast-changing media landscape. In fact, as you'll see, the landscape is changing so fast that we've now decided this historically 2-yearly research will become annual. This year, New Zealanders have consumed more media than ever. Who would have thought that the most compulsory viewing each day for months would be an announcement from the Beehive by the Prime Minister and the Director General of Health? At NZ On Air, we're digesting the data you're about to see and beginning to formulate new strategies to ensure the great quality local stories and songs we fund can be found by audiences. I'd like to invite Jeremy to now take us through the results of the research. Jeremy.
Thanks, Cam, and good morning, everyone. Thanks for joining us. My name's Jeremy Todd, and I'm really pleased to be able to take you through the results of the 2020 Where Are the Audiences study. You should be seeing the screen now. Now, if you do have a window on the right-hand side of your screen that has some attendees of the meeting, you can minimize that so you can see the full screen, all of what appears on the chart. So I recommend that you do that. So today I want to show you just a few of the most important findings from the 2020 study. It should take about 30 minutes, but by the end, I hope you'll have a picture of New Zealanders' current media behaviour and how that behaviour is changing over time. So please feel free to ask questions via Zoom throughout the presentations, and we'll answer as many as we can when we get to the end of the presentation. Now, one key change we've made to the presentation this year is to make sure that the design of the slides I show you today is very similar to what you'll find online in the report. So for veterans of past presentations, there's no need to take photos of what's on screen today. You'll find them replicated in the report. So before we get into the results, I just want to spend a few moments summarising how we conducted the study so that you can have confidence that the findings are accurate. First of all, the most important factor driving the design of the study was to ensure direct and accurate comparisons to the 3 previous studies. So we used exactly the same approach and the same questions as in those previous studies. We conducted 1,500 interviews with New Zealanders aged 15 and over. 900 of those interviews were by telephone, and 600 of them were online in homes that don't have a landline. So the total sample of 1,500 has a maximum margin for error of plus or minus 2.5%. For the 2020 study, we increased the proportion of interviews conducted online to reflect the 2018 census, which showed that 37% of people live in homes now without a landline. And that results in that 900 to 600 split in the sampling methodology. We made sure that the sample was accurately distributed across all of New Zealand, and we made sure we conducted a minimum number of interviews amongst key demographic groups to ensure we had robust sample sizes amongst those groups. And then we then post-weighted the data by age, gender, ethnicity, and access to a landline to make sure it was fully representative. So as in previous years, the key aspect of the study was to ask respondents about the media they consumed yesterday within specific time periods between 6 a.m. and midnight. So we're not asking them to estimate what they do on a typical day, and we're not asking them to recall behaviour for over an extended period, such as a week. So in this way, we're asking respondents about behaviour that was recent and real, and that they can recall easily across all of the media they consumed. So what I'm presenting today is a robust, representative, single source picture of all the media behaviour, all New Zealanders' media behaviour on a daily basis, and one that can be directly compared to the 2014, 16 and 2018 results. So there will be differences in these results to the individual market currencies, such as TV ratings, the radio survey, and online analytics. Each of those uses different methodologies, and none provide a single source view of all daily media consumption. But while those actual percentages may differ, I would expect the relativities and the trends that we're talking about to be very similar. So we do need to quickly talk about the potential impact of the COVID-19 lockdown on the results and on the survey. because there's one important difference in the methodology in 2020. Interviewing in the past 3 studies has been conducted in April to May, but this study had to be delayed due to New Zealand entering level 4 lockdown on March 26th. So instead, the study was conducted between May 21 and June 18th. So interviewing started 1 week after New Zealand moved to level 2 and was completed while New Zealand was at level 1. So at that point, a lot like today, social distancing and gathering restrictions were in place, but New Zealanders were returning to more normal behaviour than what had immediately preceded that. So it's impossible to really isolate or assess the actual impact of COVID-19 on lockdown on media behaviour and therefore the results of the study. But as you'll see, when I put up charts that show trends over time, there are no obviously anomalous results or aberrant trends evident in the data. Everything looks very consistent and steady. There will be some impact though. For instance, we have seen a decline in viewing of the Sky Sport channels in the study, and this will be influenced by the absence of live sport during the survey period. So this will have had some impact on TV viewing, particularly via the Sky TV platform. And as you will see, but as you will see, when you look at the trend lines alone, those results suggest that that impact was minimal. In addition, there is evidence to suggest that New Zealanders were tuning in to news updates more than normal, and this may have increased usage of key providers such as TVNZ1, Radio New Zealand National, and News Talk ZB. Overall, though, we do have confidence in these results, and that the 2020 study represents, or the 2020 study will not prove to be a significant outlier when subsequent studies are conducted. So let's get into the results. So I want to quickly show you the 10 key insights that we'd like you to take away from today. And then I'll take you through the evidence to support each of those insights. So first of all, in terms of audience sizes on a daily basis, then if the trends we'll show you today continue, then by 2021, digital media will overtake traditional media in terms of attracting the biggest daily audience in New Zealand. So 2020 may represent the crossover point where there are equal size audiences distributed across each of those. However, New Zealanders are still spending slightly more time with traditional media. But again, if the trends I'll show you today continue at the same rate, then that same crossover point in terms of time spent is very, very close. However, the way New Zealanders choose to use media, the media they use at different times of the day, changes across the course of a day, and traditional media still grabs the biggest audience in New Zealand in some key time zones. In the past, we've talked about a generation gap between younger and older New Zealanders in terms of their media behaviour. It's now more true to say there are 3 generations of media audiences in New Zealand. There's a younger generation, say the people aged under 40, where digital media already dominates. There's a middle generation, say 40 to 59-year-olds, who are at that closer to that crossover point I just mentioned. And older New Zealanders, say 60 plus, where traditional media still dominates, and in fact digital media is not growing. When we look at this at single channels, sites and stations in terms of the popularity of this audience that they attract on a daily basis, we see that those are now dominated by digital media. And for the first time, the most popular single provider is a digital one. So if we're at the crossover point where between digital media and traditional media attracting the biggest audience each day in New Zealand, then that also represents the point of maximum audience fragmentation. But countering that fragmentation is the fact that we are seeing dominant market leaders emerging in nearly all digital media. On demand continues to grow its audience size and its popularity as a media. And in 2018, we saw a significant change in the way people were using on demand, and where more people were choosing it as a primary source of content. That trend has continued, but it has slowed. But there has been no slowing in the change to the way New Zealanders listen to music. There are now 3 times as many who listen to streamed music as listen to music on physical formats each day. When we look at the changes to the devices and the services that New Zealanders choose to have access to, we can see that they're making longer term choices now to switch to digital media, and not just the daily choices that we see in most of this study. And lastly, in this study, we added a new question to ask about where people turn to get their news updates during COVID-19 outbreak. And we can see from that result that in times of crisis, New Zealanders are still turning to traditional media in the greatest numbers, and also that is their most trusted source of news and information. So I just want to quickly run through each of those 10 insights and quickly show you the evidence to support each of those insights, starting with the daily audience sizes across different media. So let's have a look at the daily reach of each media, and this is first in 2020 alone amongst all New Zealanders aged 15 and over. So linear TV and online video each attract the equal biggest audiences each day in 2020. Each of these media reach 6 in 10 New Zealanders each day. The second tier of media is broadcast radio, SVOD, and streamed music, each of these reaching 1 in 2 New Zealanders, or slightly fewer each day. And just to be clear, SVOD stands for subscription video on demand. So we're talking Netflix and Lightbox and Neon, etc. The third most popular tier of media is TV viewing on the Sky platform and the free-to-air platform, online gaming, and reading a newspaper. Each of these reach about a third of New Zealanders each day. On demand reaches slightly fewer than this, approximately 1 in 4 New Zealanders each day. Below this, music on physical formats, magazines, online New Zealand radio, and podcasts are used by between 12% and 16% of New Zealanders each day. So this chart summarizes the daily reach of different media in 2020. But now let's look at how that audience behavior has been changing over time. So to summarize changes over time, I'm going to show you a series of charts that show you the daily reach of each media from all the studies since 2014 amongst all New Zealanders aged 15 and over, starting with the trend lines for traditional media. So these trend lines show that the daily reach of nearly all traditional media has continued to decline since 2018, and at largely the same rate as in previous studies. There is one exception, and that's the stability of the TV viewing audience on a free-to-air platform, which has been stable since 2018, and indeed it's been stable since 2014. So just as an aside, it's trend lines like this, the consistency of the trend line, that gives us confidence that the 2020 results have not been significantly impacted by the COVID-19 lockdown in terms of influencing New Zealanders' media behaviour. So I'll now add digital media to this chart, one by one, starting with the daily reach of online video. So online video has continued to grow steadily its daily audience since 2019, and it now reaches 60% of New Zealanders. Similarly, SVOD's daily audience has also continued to grow at the same rate, now reaching 1 in 2 New Zealanders each day. Music streaming is growing slightly less rapidly, but it also shows consistent audience growth over time, and it now reaches more than 4 than 10 New Zealanders each day. So for the first time, we've measured the daily audience of online gaming, which comes on as that dot. I'll just take it off and put it on again so you can't miss it because it doesn't have a line yet. So it shows that more than 1/3 of New Zealanders play online games each day. Finally, on demand has grown significantly since 2018 and now reaching more than 1 in 4 New Zealanders each day. So in 2018, there were signs that the growth rate of some digital media may have been slowing, but the 2020 results show that growth has continued. And in fact, if these trends continue, and there's nothing in our results to suggest they won't continue, then looking at the trends on this chart, 2020 will represent the crossover point between traditional media and digital media attracting the biggest New Zealand audiences each day. If these trends continue, then it's possible that by 2021, online video will attract the biggest daily audience in New Zealand. SVOD will have overtaken radio, and perhaps even linear TV to deliver the second or third biggest audience, and music streaming may have overtaken radio listening. So that's a summary of the audience sizes across different media. But let's now look at the time that New Zealanders dedicate to each of those media. Because what we see when we look at the trend lines is that, again, that same crossover point is extremely close. So let's look first at the 2020 results. New Zealanders continue to dedicate the most time each day to watching TV. And as you'll see, by a significant margin, about 2.25 hours in 2020. So in 2020, TV still attracts the equal biggest audience and the most time spent amongst New Zealanders. And in terms of the two TV platforms, those who watch TV on the Sky platform continue to be heavier viewers than those who watch TV on a free-to-air platform. I'm now going to bring on each media in descending order in terms of the length of time New Zealanders spend on each, but they will appear on the chart in the order determined by audience size. So in that way, you'll see instances where audience size might not be reflected in the time we spend on them. So the media that New Zealanders dedicate the second most time each day to is SVOD, more than 1.5 hours per day. Following that, radio attracts the third most time in 2020, with an average 83 minutes spent listening each day. So despite attracting the equal biggest audience, New Zealanders watch online video for a comparatively shorter length of time, just over an hour per day. And in fact, New Zealanders listen to stream music for a similar amount of time as online video at 65 minutes per day. And that's significantly longer than the time we dedicate to listening to music on physical formats, which is at the bottom of that chart, 14 minutes per day. New Zealanders spend an average of nearly an hour playing online gaming and 30 minutes watching on demand each day. So that's how the time spent breaks down in 2020. How's that behavior changing over time? So as you've just seen, TV continues to attract the most time among New Zealanders, but this has declined for the first time in the study from 156 minutes in 2018 to 137 minutes in 2020. TV's overall decline in terms of time spent has been mainly driven by further decline in time spent viewing on the Sky TV platform. I should note that this lower result for viewing TV via Sky TV could easily be impacted by the decline in viewing of Sky Sport due to the absence of live sport during the survey period. But you can also see that that decline could also be part of an ongoing trend. In addition, New Zealanders are now spending less time listening to the radio than in 2018 and less time listening to music on physical formats. Both of these declining trends have been in place since 2014. Conversely, the amount of time that we're spending watching SVOD each day continues to rise both steadily and rapidly. Netflix, Lightbox, and Neon all launched in New Zealand in 2015. So SVOD has risen to this point in terms of the time we spend in 5 years. New Zealanders also continue to dedicate increasing amounts of time to online video, are now up to 67 minutes, and time spent listening to stream music is following a very similar growth path as online video. And finally, the time that New Zealanders spend watching on demand has increased since 2018 to 31 minutes. Note that there were signs that some of the growth of SVOD, online video, and on demand was slowing in 2018, but in 2020, the results show that that growth of these media has actually accelerated since 2018. Okay, so let's now look at how the media use changes over the course of a day, because there are still times in the day when traditional media is still most popular by a significant margin. We asked people about the media they used yesterday during 5 different time zones, which means that we can show you how the overall pattern of audience reach changes over the course of a day. The first line shows the audience reach of radio listening at different times of the day. Broadcast radio reaches more than 1 in 4 New Zealanders between 6 AM and 9 AM, and in fact, it's the most popular media in this zone. It largely holds that audience throughout the day, but then the audience falls away sharply after 6 PM. Online video starts the day as the second most popular media between 6 and 9 AM. Its audience then grows between 9 AM to 6 PM and is the most popular media amongst New Zealanders during the day. As you'll see as I bring on more media to this chart, online video is nevertheless than the second or third most popular media amongst New Zealanders. TV continues to attract its biggest audience during the traditional evening TV peak period. And in fact, TV remains the most popular media during that time, 6 PM to 10:30, by a significant margin. Compared to other media, SVOD viewing is relatively evenly spread throughout the day, without a sharp peak during one period. The most popular time for New Zealanders to tune into SVOD is between 6 and 8:30 PM, when along with online video, it is the second most popular media choice. Lastly, streamed music is most widespread, most popular during the day between 9 AM and 6 PM. So these results show how the media New Zealanders choose to engage with changes throughout the day. And while digital media continues to attract more and more New Zealanders for longer periods of time, there remains periods of each day when traditional media continues to be the most popular choice amongst New Zealanders. So the results I've shown you so far have all been based on New Zealanders aged 15 and over. But of course, media behaviour varies widely between different types of New Zealanders. And there are some groups who have already moved past this crossover point of digital media attracting a bigger audience than traditional media. For instance, the media consumption of Asian New Zealanders is very different to the overall result, with just 28% of that group watching TV each day and 86% watching online video each day. So all these different subgroups are discussed in full in the full report. But for today, I just want to summarize the biggest influence on media behavior, which, as in previous studies, is age and life stage. So in the past, we've talked about a generation gap between younger and older New Zealanders. And as I've said before, in 2020, it's more correct to say that there are 3 generations of media users. There's the younger generation, amongst whom digital media now dominates, or already dominates some time ago. The middle generation, which is transitioning to digital media, and an older generation, among whom traditional media still dominates and digital media is not growing yet. So let's look first at the media behavior of the younger generation, which for the purposes of this summary, for this analysis, we've defined as people aged 15 to 39. So TV and radio each attract 40% of this age group each day, and this has continued to decline since 2018. Online video is the most popular media amongst 15 to 39-year-olds, with 84% of this audience tuning in each day, and daily reach increasing significantly since 2018. Music streaming is the second most popular media amongst this age group, and it now reaches 72% of 15 to 39-year-olds each day. SVOD continues to increase its audience amongst younger New Zealanders, now reaching 2/3 of this age group each day. And finally, on demand reaches 1 in 4 15 to 39-year-olds each day, and this has increased slightly since 2018. So this chart shows how digital media has already overtaken traditional media amongst younger New Zealanders. And of course, if we were to show you an even younger age group, then this difference would be even greater. So let's now look at the media use of the middle generation of New Zealanders, which we've defined for this summary as 40 to 59-year-olds. So amongst 40 to 59-year-olds, TV remains the most popular media each day, reaching 2/3 of this audience. However, the size of this audience has continued to decline since 2018, as has the audience listening to radio and listening to music on physical formats. On the other hand, online videos continue to steadily increase in popularity amongst this age group, and this media now reaches 6 in 10 40 to 59-year-olds each day. Similarly, SVOD reaches a similar proportion, Similarly, SVOD shows a similar growth rate amongst 40 to 59-year-olds and now reaches 1 in 2 New Zealanders in this age group. Streamed music and on demand have both shown significant growth amongst 40 to 59-year-olds since 2018, and each now attract about 1/3 of this group each day. So this is the generation that best reflects the overall finding that 2020 represents the crossover point between traditional media and digital media, attracting the biggest audiences in New Zealand. And if the trends on this chart continue, then by next year, it's possible that online video will be the most popular media with this age group, and SVOD will be 3rd most popular after TV. So finally, let's have a look at the media use of the older generation, those aged 60 and over. Amongst this age group, traditional media remains dominant and shows no sign of decline. TV reaches nearly 9 in 10 60-plus-year-olds each day, and 2/3 listen to the radio. Conversely, no digital media reaches more than 1 in 4 60-plus-year-olds each day, and any audience growth in digital media is slow. SVOD and on demand are growing in popularity, but it is at a much slower rate than amongst younger New Zealanders. So that summarizes the overall media consumption in 2020 and how it's changing over time. Let's now look at what that means in terms of the audiences using specific channels, sites, and stations, because of course, we're seeing significant change there too. YouTube, particularly for online video, is now the most popular single site, channel, or station. It has always been the 2nd most popular singles provider in previous studies, but since 2018, it has grown to now reach nearly 1 in 2 New Zealanders each day. TVNZ1 has maintained its daily audience since 2018 and is the 2nd most popular channel, site, or station. As we'll see, this stability in audience size could be influenced by New Zealanders turning to TVNZ1 for news and updates during the COVID-19 outbreak. We'll come back to that in the last slide. The only other traditional media providers in the top channels, sites, and stations are TVNZ2 and TV and 3. However, the daily audiences for both of these channels have continued to decline. In particular, TVNZ2's daily audience has fallen to 14% of New Zealanders tuning in each day. Compare that to the continued fast rise of Netflix since its launch in 2015, or the audience using Facebook for watching video. Both of these now reach 1 in 3 New Zealanders each day. Spotify has also continued to grow and now reaches nearly 3 in 10 New Zealanders each day, whereas YouTube for music, as opposed to video, has now not grown significantly since 2018. Now, as an aside, when we calculate the net daily reach for YouTube by combining the audience who watch it for videos and those who use it for music, the net daily audience of YouTube is 51%, which means that the audience using YouTube for music alone is actually quite small. Finally, TVNZ On Demand rounds out the top sites, channels, and stations. TVNZ On Demand has grown its audience significantly since 2018 and now reaches 1 in 5 New Zealanders each day. According to this study, it now reaches a bigger daily audience than TVNZ2. So note that there are no longer any radio stations in the top stations, channels, and sites. They are at the next tier of single providers after these top ones. The most popular radio stations are Radio New Zealand National and News Talk ZB, each reaching about 1 in 10 New Zealanders each day. Stuff and New Zealand Herald videos reach a similar number of New Zealanders each day. So if 2020 represents the crossover point between traditional and digital media attracting the biggest audience in New Zealand, then that point in time also represents the point of maximum audience fragmentation across different media. But countering that fragmentation, we are seeing the emergence of dominant market leaders in most digital media, which helps to reduce that fragmentation to some extent. Here is the daily reach of SVOD providers in New Zealand, showing Netflix to be the dominant provider and nearly the only one demonstrating audience growth since 2018. Amazon Prime has grown since 2018, and Disney Plus has emerged as the second most popular provider since 2018. But according to this study, otherwise no other SVOD provider has grown its audience since 2018. This next chart shows the daily audiences on different music streaming providers, with Spotify now the most popular provider and increasing its lead over YouTube. No other music streaming service reaches a large audience, and no other provider has grown its audience since 2018. In fact, there were several music streaming providers we were trying to capture in the study that failed to register a daily audience in this study. Finally, this chart shows how YouTube and Facebook dominate the online video category and have continued to grow their daily audience since 2018. Unlike other digital media, there are 2 other tiers of providers for online video, with Stuff and Herald reaching 1 in 10 New Zealanders each day. But similar to other digital media, these second and third tier providers haven't grown their audience significantly since 2018, and they have significantly smaller audiences than the market leaders. So on demand, it continues to grow overall its audience overall, but we've seen a slowing down in the evolution in the way New Zealanders use this media. So first of all, here is the breakdown of the providers of New Zealand, of on-demand in New Zealand in terms of daily reach. On-demand is another example of a digital media with a dominant and growing market leader, TVNZ On Demand, and a series of smaller competitors who have not grown their audience since 2018. In 2018, we saw a significant change in the way New Zealanders were using On Demand. While it was still mostly used as a source of catch-up for TV programs that New Zealanders had missed, the proportion who are using this media as a primary source of content had increased significantly. That trend has continued since 2018, but the rate of change has slowed considerably. We can't say with certainty what's caused that slowdown, but we do note that the proportion of homes with a PVR has declined significantly since 2018, which means there are now more households who might miss a TV show when it's broadcast and then rely on demand to catch up. However, the revolution in the way New Zealanders listen to music has not slowed down in any way. 3 times as many people now listen to streamed music as listen to music on physical formats, and they do so for twice as long. This chart shows the daily audience listening to music on physical formats on the left and listening to streamed music on the right. So the size of the audience listening to physical formats has continued to decline since 2018 and now reaches just 16% of New Zealanders each day. Stream music has continued to grow its daily audience and now reaches more than 4 in 10 New Zealanders, nearly 3 times as many as listen to physical formats. These lines show the amount of time that listeners spend listening to each source amongst people who use each source. So those who listen to music on physical formats listen to for nearly an hour and a half each day, whereas those who listen to streamed music listen to for more than 2.5 hours each day. There will be many reasons for this. One will be the convenience of streamed music, allowing listeners to set and forget rather than make a new selection. Another will be the high level of interest in music amongst younger New Zealanders, and that younger demographic being more likely to use digital media overall and streamed music in particular. So the media that New Zealanders use is intrinsically linked to the devices and the services, the platforms that they have available to them. And when we look at what those devices and services are, we see that New Zealanders are making longer term choices beyond their daily media choices that will be driving the overall change in traditional and digital media use. First of all, let's look at the incidence of devices and services that enable access to traditional media. While nearly 8 in 10 New Zealanders have a TV, this proportion has fallen since 2018, though it has not fallen as significantly as the proportion who have a radio. Now just 6 in 10 New Zealanders have access to a radio. Similarly, the proportion who have access to Sky TV has fallen to 33% since 2018, according to this study, and that reflects the fall in TV viewing using this platform. And just over 1 in 4 now have access to a PVR, which could be impacting how New Zealanders are using on demand overall. On the other hand, the incidence of all devices and services that enable access to digital media show continued significant growth. 6 in 10 now have access to Netflix, the same proportion as that have access to a radio. Nearly half now have access to a smart TV connected to the internet. More than a third have a Chromecast or similar, and more than a quarter have a gaming console. So this chart clearly shows how New Zealanders are making longer term choices in terms of switching to digital media, or at least enabling them to have access to digital media. Finally, in 2020, we added a question to understand the sources of news that New Zealanders were using to keep up to date during the COVID-19 outbreak. And these results show that while New Zealanders are increasingly using digital media overall, their most used and their most trusted source of information in a time of crisis remains traditional media. These results show the proportion of New Zealanders who used each source of news and information during lockdown. TVNZ news updates, both broadcast and online, were the most widely used by a significant margin. Following this, Stuff was next most widely used, followed by The Herald and 3 News. We then asked New Zealanders what was their most trusted source of news. And again, TVNZ news updates were the most trusted by an even more significant margin. And that was over the official COVID-19 website and then 3 News. Note that encouragingly, different sources of social media were a news source used by many New Zealanders, but these were a trusted source amongst very, very few New Zealanders. And there you have it. That brings us to the end of the summary of the insights for the 2020 Where Are the Audience study. I'll now pass you back to Cam to close and before we take questions.
Kia ora, Jeremy. Thanks for those insights. While overall it might look a little bleak for some of the more traditional platforms, let's not forget that free-to-air television audiences have remained stable. TVNZ On Demand is growing and Radio New Zealand has continued to deliver stable audiences. Furthermore, we're not always looking for the largest audience. In some cases, the public media content we fund is for quite specific and targeted audiences. And of course, the beauty of our platform neutral funding strategy is that we can spread the content around to find the audiences. Now that we have this research and the recently released children's media use research as well, it's clear we must focus on young New Zealanders. They are the generation experiencing the least local content. We're underway with putting together a review of our content strategy for children and youth. In addition, we're turning our minds to content promotion. We need to ensure the great content that's made is able to find its audience. What I'll do now is check in with my colleague Alana here around some of the questions that maybe have raised in the chat, and obviously any others, please do use the chat function to send those through.
Oh, yeah, we've had a few questions start to come in towards the end of your presentation. Thanks, Jeremy. They're all for you, Jeremy. So if you get any of them wrong, you lose the chase. So one question was, do we have time spent graphs for different generations?
In the report, we might not.
I don't think we do.
That. No.
No. I know that you'll have done that for the younger audience breakdown that you're doing.
Yes. I haven't got the report in front of me, unfortunately, but we can easily provide that.
Okay, that's great. Well, if there's anything extra to today, we will add it to our website as and when we can get those things. Another question that came in was, this is with regards to music listening, did you ask about smart speakers such as Alexa in terms of devices?
No, we didn't ask about the devices. We tend not to ask about the devices that people use to consume media in the study. It's more about the media rather than the device used. So we don't have a smart speaker and we don't have Alexa covered.
Okay.
Alexa would be covered under streamed music, though. It would fall into that category.
Also, a question about the daily reach of online video sites and asking if we specifically included News Hub and One News.
Yes. Yeah, I believe, yes, we did.
Okay. And also there was a question about the rise of online news sources such as Newsroom and Business Desk, and they weren't specifically included because we were actually only asking about the most trusted news sources.
No, I believe we did have them covered.
They were in the big list.
We had quite a big list in terms of the news sources that people could access. They were in the list that we covered. They weren't in the top sites that I've just showed you just then.
Okay. I think we had another question about, just let me whiz back up here. Sorry, being a bit sensitive. How come online radio streaming is split off from radio listening?
One is broadcast radio. So radio listening is broadcast radio, specifically that, and then listening to a New Zealand radio station online is the second and kept separate, partly to deal with iHeartRadio, but also to understand all the different sources of media.
Okay. A question also about the what we've included in the SVOD platforms, and this one specifically about NZ On Screen. It's not an SVOD platform, it's not subscription.
No, it's not. We have conversations about how where we categorize that one in particular. There are others as well that don't nicely fit into a pigeonhole, but it's the most appropriate place to cover that off, and so respondents see that as an option in front of them.
Okay. Another one for you, Jeremy. Gosh, you're getting them all today. Do you feel that we would have already hit the crossover point between traditional and digital if it weren't for COVID?
No, I don't know. I mean, it's impossible to say with certainty. I don't think so. I mean, I think that what we're saying now is we are at the crossover point in 2020. Whether that was in March or whether that's in July, I think it's too granular a level to try and get down to. I think we're at the crossover point now. Yeah, and now means 2020.
Okay, question about TikTok and Instagram, and were they covered in the study?
Yes.
They're in the list.
They were, yes.
Yep. And also, this is about samples. Are you able to tell us what percentage of the sample were of Pacific background?
Yeah, good question. What we do with several key ethnic groups such as Asian, Maori and Pacific is make sure we conduct a minimum number of interviews, which I believe is 200 interviews. Pacifica is the hardest group to get, and I'm not sure we quite got to the 200 that we were aiming for. I think it's somewhere between 150 to 100 and 200. So we've got a robust sample of them, and then what we do is we weight them to reflect the actual proportion in the population. So
and there's an in-depth report coming on Pacifica, Māori.
And in fact, what we do for Māori and Pacific is we do a separate booster sample that's covered, and when we produce that Māori and Pacifica report, that booster sample is included in that to upweight that sample size even further. But for this study, it is just under 200, which is still a robust sample. And then we do upweight that to make sure we represent it fully across the survey.
Cool. I think we need to keep Cam on his toes. We've got a question for him. So will you be looking at where you put New Zealand local content as a result of this?
Yes, look, to be honest, I think the fact that we have, as I said at the start, a platform neutral approach and that we fund content on various digital platforms already, I think goes to show that we have shown some flexibility. There are a couple of important funding requirements for platforms that are relevant to this question. The first is the platform must have a commissioning function, someone at the platform who has oversight of the production process, ensuring a quality product is delivered. That's not our role. And secondly, we require a platform to already have shown a commitment to investing in local content. So neither of those rule out the idea that we would look at content for more digital platforms. But I guess the important point for us as well is it's in our interest that there remain viable local platforms. And at present, their strongest selling point for us is for us and for them, I think, is their local content. So we wouldn't want to undermine that.
Thanks, Cam. Jeremy, another one here for you about the differences. Are the trends and the main takeaways different for key ethnic groups?
Yes, short answer. Asian New Zealanders in particular are very different in terms of their overall media consumption. I think from memory it was 28% daily reach of television and 84% daily reach for online video. So that is very different. And that's an ethnic difference. We also see, rather than any other, that's an ethnic difference. Whereas, say, for instance, with Maori and Pacifica, they're a very young, both very young cohorts in the population. And so the differences we see there are driven partly by ethnicity and partly by their age. So some tend to be, there's some behavior that is more digitally oriented and some more that is more traditional media oriented. It's the Pacifica and Maori cohorts are hard to summarize overall, but yes, there is differences in those compared to the overall population.
And again, there'll be more detailed reports coming out shortly that have more breakdown there. And similarly, there's a question about a breakdown of socioeconomic status from respondents.
Yes, that is a big factor. And there's a report that will come out about lower socioeconomic groups as well. Yes, if you have a higher level of income, then you have more likely to have Netflix, more likely to consume SVOD, but it's not quite as stark a difference as you might expect. Again, there's all sorts of different factors going on. So Maori and Pacifica, there's an ethnic group, it's a different ethnic group, they're quite a young group, and they tend to be lower socio. So there's all sorts of a mix of influences going on in their behavior. I think we haven't started the lower socioeconomic report yet, but I think it's hard to summarize that group, and probably best to wait till that report comes out.
Okay, and another question regarding the Maori respondents. Do we know what percentage were reo speakers? And I don't think we do. We didn't ask that.
No, we didn't ask that.
And also, has the crossover already happened in the Maori population? As in, have they already gone more digital than traditional?
That's a really good question. And I'm sorry, I don't have the data in front of me and I can't remember. I think no, I think they are at the crossover point. Geez, I don't want to answer this question and get that wrong, and I can't remember what it says right now. But the report will come out and it will say that. I think it's best to say that they're at the crossover point as well.
That seems to be all the questions that we've got for now. So I think we can wrap up. We will take further questions by email if you have any. You can send them to communications@nzonair.govt.nz and we will get answers to you as quickly as we can. You'll also find the full report on our website today, and those subsequent reports that Jeremy's referred to will be coming out in coming weeks, months, and we'll pop them up there as well and let you know that they're there. They're always a great deep dive as well. Back to you, Cam.
I think you've just summed up what I was about to say, Alana, but beautifully said. I guess I just want to apologise. We would have loved to have done this in a proper form, and I understand that's the way that it's always been done in the past. It's definitely significantly difficult, more difficult to kind of get the level of engagement we would have liked from you all. But I do hope that you have found the research as useful as we do. And as Alana said, it will be available literally now on our website if you want to kind of go and spend some time looking it over. But from us, for now, that's it. Thank you so much for joining us. Ka kite anō.